this series of videos, I will show you how to use a Chromebook to create and upload and publish websites using common tools that are available for free in the internet and that work with your Chromebook. By the way, all of these apps and websites and maybe a couple of extensions should also work with a PC or a Mac or even with a Linux machine. But since right now we're interested in showing students how to use their Chromebooks to make some websites, I'm going to stick to doing this on a Chromebook and showing you what the possibilities are available to you. If you see as I scroll down, I'm definitely on a Chromebook right now, and I've got Chrome installed. I'm going to be depending a little bit on the Gmail to get an account going. And that's pretty much it. Although you have a Google Drive, that's not where we're going to be storing anything. We're going to be storing everything on another website. Rather than using an online drive, we're going to be using something very similar. We're going to be using a repository. Repositories that I recommend for sure. There's multiple ways of doing it, but this has worked for me for the last few years. There are going to be the repositories at GitHub. I have a link on this page called GitHub Pages. GitHub Pages is a different concept altogether, almost, than just regular GitHub that I'm showing you. But I'll be sure to tell you more about that toward the end of the video series. So I go to github.com. You could have also just typed in the website github.com. And if you don't have an account, and probably you don't, make sure you sign up. And it will ask you to create your account. Now, I already have an account. It's called idtprof. That's why it's prompting me for that. But I'm going to erase that, and I'm going to instead come up with a new account, something that I'm thinking of maybe for the last couple of minutes. I think I'm going to call it TUTS for Tutorials IDT, Tutorials for Internet Development Technology. It's something that's simple, easy, and I can remember it. One thing that it's one of these things that when you sort of pick a password and they tell you to come up with a hint and they ask you for the name of a dog, your favorite pet, whatever, make sure that you remember it as well as you remember your pet's name, because this will become your key to using GitHub, is that you use the same account name every time. Make sure, I totally recommend that you'll notice that I didn't use any capital letters. I did not say capital T, UTS, capital IDT. I just said everything is lowercase, that's IDT. And I use that because on my email, I can use pretty much any email that I want. So I'm going to say that.idt@paco.org. I know for a fact that I don't have that email, that it doesn't exist, but my server will create it just this one time so that I'm able to load it up. Make sure that you use your email account, one that you have access to, one that you know works, that you know that if it's anybody sends you an email, you'll be able to get it, because otherwise you will not be able to complete the sign up process. I'm gonna come up with a password that I can remember also, and it doesn't hurt to have a notepad next to you and write down all this information if you want to take a picture of it, something that just holds it close to your memory. Tell your students to do the same thing, same process, to have an email that's easy to remember, that they have access to, and to write down those passwords. I'm going to verify my account, and it does that by proving that I'm human by rotating that, and did it in 2.8 seconds, and that's the only one that I needed. Gives me a check mark. I'm going to select the plan. And what does that mean? Select the plan. Does this cost anything? It could cost money if you wanted to do more than what we're going to be doing. But for the sake of being a student, being an instructor, working at El Centro, the free plan will do just fine. I'm not going to save this, although I would recommend that you do. I'm not going to save it because I showed you I use another account. I'm just going to close that. I would click save if I were you, but I'm going to close it. It tells me that the individual, that's a plan picked for you. I'm going to choose the free one. and it tells me what I can do, the limitations are, and this is what you get with the Pro. It's $7 a month. I'm not selling this. I don't get any money for it, so I'm just going to choose free. Okay, so welcome to GitHub, and it asks a little survey. What are you going to do? Well, if you're a student, by all means, click a student. You go to school. If you take classes, you're taking this class. Well, say I go to school. You can say that you do some other thing or that you're a teacher, and I'll click on that because I educate people, or I try to. How much program experience do you have? And once again, this is only a survey. Do I know a lot? Do I know a moderate amount? I know somewhere between these two. So I'm going to say that I'm not necessarily that I'm new to programming, but that I know something. What do you plan to do with GitHub? And what do I do? Use an API, schoolwork, and student projects. I'm also interested in. That's up to you. If you want to fill out anything, I'm going to just say complete the setup. So I wait a little bit. By the way, hundreds, if not of thousands of, if not millions of people use GitHub. So it's not necessarily the fastest service. Whenever I tell you to save a file or to commit a file, you have to wait for it to update. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Give it some time. If it takes more than 5 minutes, something may be definitely wrong. But just know that it's not going to be an immediate process, kind of like when you're working locally on a computer that's got a hard drive and it's got a file management system that you can read. Everything that we're doing is going to take place online in the GitHub servers. So it's telling me that it's sent me an email, and I have my Gmail open over here. And although this is a different email, like I said, I will get any email. It tells me uh, please verify your email address. I'll click on that and open it. It's sent it to tutsidt@papa.org, which is a fake ID. But if you send me something there, I'll definitely be able to see it. I'm going to verify my email address by clicking on the button. It's going to take me back to GitHub, and then it's going to tell me to create a new repository. And this is very important. The name that you have picked for your account, the one that's in all lowercase, that has no spaces, it's got no special characters or anything like that, that's similar in concept to Tuts IDT. That's what you want to call your repository. Right now, like I said, it's remembering my other account, but I'm going to type in TUTSIDT, and then my repository, the file system where I want to work, is going to be called whatever my username is. In this instance, is tutsidt dot idt, or rather GITHUB, github.io. And this is very important. Whatever your repository name is, add a dot, or rather your account name is for your repository, add a dot github.io. It'll give you a check mark and say that's a valid name. You can give it a description if you want. I'm just going to say space to teach about web design with Chromebook. It's public because I'm not paying anything. I'm not gonna. And by the way, everything that you put in the server is public, so don't use this for personal information. And then if you want, sure, initialize this repository with a README just so that you'll have a file to work with. And then I'm going to tell it to create repository. I'm not going to bother with a license just yet or git ignore. I create the repository. So tutsidt.github.io is being created. GitHub now is going to act sort of like an online drive, sort of. The repository holds files just like a web directory, just like a website would. There's lots of more information within these pages. Read the guide, and it says learn Git and GitHub without any code. Now, we're not doing programming in the sense that we're working with a team and we're actually developing a program that's going to run and do something. We're trying to get a website going. We just want to take advantage of the free space that's out there. So now I have my username, tutsidt, followed by my username.github.io. This is my repository. Once again, no spaces, no special characters, no uppercase. Be consistent in your naming, and I totally encourage you to always use all lowercase. no spaces, no dashes or anything like that. Some of these things are valid, but the less you complicate the naming of your files, the better. I'm going to dismiss this for now. About GitHub Actions, I can click somewhere, I think, and just tell it to keep on going. And okay, so now maybe this looks a little bit familiar. Do you have Google Drive? Do you have the Microsoft Drive, the OneDrive, something like that? If you use Dropbox, maybe this will look a little bit familiar. But in file management, and I wish that I could open up a file management system in Chrome, but we don't have one. Instead, imagine that this is your root directory, tutsidt.github.io. That's like maybe your C drive. There's nothing in there, except we did create this readme.md. In here, now we can create a file. And how do I create a file? There's a button there called Create New File. And the file that I want to create, it's going to be just like your very first web project. It's going to be called index.html. Notice the slashes here. You have a directory. Your root is mine is tutsidt.github.io. Yours is going to be whatever your username is, .github.io. It's going to be followed by the slash telling me that inside of this root directory, I have a file called index.html. And for now, I'm just going to type in hello world, ! Notice there's no code. This is just text. I hope that you're familiar enough with HTML to know that HTML is a very forgiving language. It will accept anything that you give it. And until you start to get a little bit complicated with, or more complex, I should say, with JavaScript or other coding, other scripting in your pages, that just a regular message will not cause an error. It will just display whatever the text is. I'm going to scroll down. We don't have a save command, but we can commit new files. You'll see that this is a little bit grayed out. It says create index.html, which is what I just did. So that will make sure that something is put into the record, but you could say something else that is more specific to your case. I'll say my first file in GitHub, which is the same as creating an index.html. It makes sense to me. You have an optional space here for an extended description. I'm going to commit directly to the master branch. I'm not going to get too far deep into the workings of GitHub. I'm just interested in getting one file called index.html saved, and so that we can have a website. I'm going to skip this create a new branch. Like I said, you can learn about that later on your own. If I click on this green button and I commit the new file, basically this hello world is going to be the contents of an index.html file. And now the index.html file appears inside of my root directory. It's right next to readme.md. MD, by the way, is a markdown. HTML, as you know, is markup. HTML is hypertext markup language. MD is a markdown file. And maybe later on in the video series, I will talk a little bit about MD files, but for now, I'm just going to deal with HTML. Now, like I said, it's going to take maybe a minute or two, or maybe less, to publish this. In order for me to see what my website is, or what my website looks like, notice here the github.com says that I'm GitHub user / tutsidt, and right now I'm looking at the tree master, etc. I'm looking at the file management system here. But my website is actually going to be tutsidt.github.io, because it's going to be my username, in my case, tutsidt, and then I'm going to add .github.io. IO is somewhere in the Indic Ocean. I press enter and I get a file. It's called, well, it doesn't have a name, but because it's called index.html, but it doesn't have a title. It doesn't have anything except the words hello world. If I view the page source, just like any other thing, any other page, it'll show me the contents of the page. It says hello world. So it's very important that you do this first step to publish a mostly blank file, to make sure that your username.github.io file works as a web page. I'm going to close this. And I know that some people had been asking recently, how is it that we're going to edit our files? Well, you just saw me create a file and publish it. And once it's published, once you have the system going, you can go back into your root file and click on index.html or whatever file you created. And you can see here that it says hello world. And if I want to edit it, I'm going to find the edit icon. It's that little pencil. And then when I get just a little bit fancy, once I'm in editing mode, I can say, go up to the top of the page and I can say, hey, this is going to be an HTML file. The HTML file code starts here. I'm going to have a header that's h1 that says hello world, and close that tag. And then maybe I'll do a paragraph that says this is my first GitHub file. Close that paragraph, close the HTML. Now I'm typing this manually, but if you had a page that, or rather a web code that you already had and you wanted to just dump in here, you could do that. If you email it to yourself, or if you had it available on Google Drive, you can copy and paste. I'm going to skip down here, and I have now updated index.html. I will commit those changes. And I'll have to wait a little bit more, just because, once again, this is not the fastest system. Millions of people using this. And now it's already done. It shows me what my file looks like. I can go back to tuts.idt.github.io so that I can see where the file is again. And let's see, I'm going to close this other file, and I'm going to go back into my GitHub page, which is IDT, or rather, I think I said it's tuts IDT. This is why I tell you to write it down. So it's still working on it. It hasn't gotten up there. Well, I clicked a couple of times and now enough time has passed. Hello world, this is my first GitHub file. Right click and view the page source. And here's the code that I wrote. Now, this is very simple HTML. Obviously, you're going to want to put in your doc type. You want to put in a title. You want to put in what you would normally tell your students to publish. But this is how you get started. At least you'll have an index.html file. Once you start to get a little bit more into it, you'll be creating directories and navigation that skips back and forth. And in the following videos, I'll tell you a little bit more about file management, a little bit about how to get HTML5 working inside of the files. Hint, it works the same as in any other system, but you just have to sort of know how to work the system, and it's not very difficult. If you're familiar with file management on a PC or on a Mac, you know that you have the root, you have your directories, and then inside each directory you should have an index file. It works the same way. I'll also show you how to add a CSS file and how to link it. And once again, here's another hint. It works the same way. Everything that I'm showing you, it works the same here as it does in a PC, as it does on a Mac. So make sure that if you have any questions about this, to send me an email, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.